The Management Committee meeting. As a reminder, this is a formal meeting. Members of the public can speak during the public session, but not at other times, please. The meeting is being filmed, and by being present, attendees are deemed to have consented to the use of the images and sound. And finally, attendees should not disclose any personal information that would infringe people's data protection rights. Thank you. So we start with apologies for absence, and we just have apologies for one councillor, Councillor Rob Pullinger, and everybody else is here. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest, please, in the room? No? And any declarations of non-pecuniary interests? None. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Chairman's announcements. I have just one brief announcement. So the Town Clerk called me earlier and asked if we could consider an urgent item of business. In fact, it's an item for information relating to some vandalism that's been going on at Franklin's Rec. We'll add that to the end of the agenda as the final item, if that's okay, please. Okay, public open session. Do we have any members of the public attending, please? There are none in the room. No members of the public. Okay. And invited speakers, we have none. So are there any members' questions? Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. We've noticed that the trees are now being taken down in the market square, but I've also had comments from residents about how we're destroying the market square at the present because of that. What are our communications to the public in that respect on either our website, explaining exactly what's going on so that it can actually be corrected and explained exactly why they're coming out? They're coming out for a very good reason. But at the moment, people just think it's a question of virtual public community vandalism.
That's a very good point. Would officers like to respond to that, please?
So I'll take that one. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we haven't directly prepared any lines yet for that activity that's happened, given that it's been led by CBC essentially. We do need to let members of the public know it's happening, but along with that, we also need to let them know there'll be a lengthy interval in between the trees having been removed and new ones being put in. So we're working on that as part of our next comms release, I think, which was next week.
Did you want to come back?
Yes, if I may say so. It's not good enough. It should have been done by now. It needs to be done as a matter of urgency, if possibly with CBC's knowledge of what we're doing. But frankly, to do it now after the event is not good enough.
Could I suggest maybe officers draft a communication which we use in our channels and give CBC 48 hours to approve or modify it and then publish it, perhaps? Councillor Russell.
I don't think we need to go back to CBC at all. We've got a policy on this. We've discussed it at council. We know that we were in agreement with the trees coming out because of the damage the roots were doing. And we also know that it's our policy to delay until we can see what happens with the bus exit lane. That's all that needs to be said. And then we will plant new trees, perhaps in slightly different places. That's all that needs to be said.
Yeah. Okay. Any other members' questions? Councillor Fage.
Back when we relaunched the market after the COVID lockdown, there was some investment in signage with the new branding, which was done for the market. But having visited the market several times in the last few weeks, I haven't really seen that branding on the market square when the market's going on. Could we have a little look at where those signs are and try to get some of that branding back on the market? Because a lot of work is going on social media to promote it, but we need that physical brand at the market as well, so that people can see that it's our service and this is what it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Officers were instructed by a senior CBC officer to remove the signage that was just above Century House due to matters relating to pigeons and cleaning. But we can certainly look into that, yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Even if it's at a ground level.
Any further members' questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right. So let's move on to the minutes of the last meeting then. So that was the meeting held on Tuesday, the 18th of October. As usual, we'll go through it twice. We'll start off going through for accuracy, and I'll use the page numbers that are on in the pack. So any corrections on page 5, please? Page 6, page 7, page 8, Councillor Fage.
So if we heard back now on the, so sorry, this is 10A on the bus exit lane.
Sorry, this is corrections, not matters arising.
I have no corrections, Chairman.
Thank you. Page 9. Councillor Russell.
Could I make a comment, please, about several of these minutes? The first one is actually item D on page 8. It was resolved by the Town Centre Management Committee that we don't need that. It simply should say it was resolved that. It's too many words and unnecessary.
Yes.
And a lot of them say it was resolved. Well, it was obvious it was resolved by the Town Centre Management Committee.
That's a fair point. Any other corrections on page 9? No. Page 10. And then page 11 is the last page, the exempt page. Okay. So anyone happy to move those are accurate and correct, apart from that one correction? Thank you. So back to the start, and this time matters arising. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Councillor Strong.
Item B, the very bottom part, members requested officers investigate official ownership of the War Memorial and Victorian water fountain at the corner of the High Street and Station Road. Is that ongoing at the moment, or what's the situation, please?
Looking to see if officers have an update.
It's my understanding that we've been inquiring with one of the senior officers at CBC around this particular matter, and they've gone back to check their own records as well on this.
Councillor Strong.
What do our records say?
I don't think we should be speculating publicly.
Maybe it'd be possible for officers to get back to members offline on that. Give us an update if that's possible. Any other matters arising on page 7? No. Page 8. Councillor Fage.
Yes, sorry. Sorry, I jumped the gun ever so slightly, but 10A bus route. So it was resolved to write to senior planning officers and Councillor Delgado about the lack of connectivity around what these bus routes look like and also the bus exit lane. I can tell from other items on the agenda that it doesn't look like we're going to see any progress on the bus exit lane until 2023-24, which is frustrating. But the interchange is due to be up and running, if I'm not mistaken, by the summer. I think most of the build will be completed in the next couple of months. Is it the end of March? We haven't got a clue what these bus routes look like. Not a clue. Do we hear back?
I have spoken to the CBC officer today about the bus routes proposal, and they've come back saying that as they understand things, our public transport team is still in discussions with Grant Palmer and any other operators, and then they're still waiting for further feedback from one of their colleagues.
Councillor Fage.
Just reply then. So we as a committee came to a position about where we would be keen to see buses stopping, standing, moving generally. And whilst that was in the context of closing the bus exit lane, which I think is definitely still an ambition of this committee, and I don't think there's any harm in our officers trying to involve themselves in those conversations if possible. Things like the use of the bus standing on Church Street, for example. These are important things that the sooner we start to make use of them and finalise future bus routes, the easier it will be to have those future conversations about the bus exit lane.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other matters arising on page 8? No, page 9. Councillor Russell.
On the crime statistics, it was agreed that concerns should be raised with PC Beer. Is he going to come back to council? Because it's some time since he's been. I just asked the question.
That's a very good point. Do you have an immediate response, or shall we just take that offline? Take that offline. Okay, thank you. That's a good point. Anything else on page 9? Page 10, and finally page 11. Okay, that's the end of the matters arising. So that takes us to items for consideration. So the first is the Market Square vision update. So we have a written report which will take as read. Mr. Lord, do you have any updates since then? Okay, so who would like to start the discussion, please? Councillor Fage.
Okay, so thank you ever so much for this report, and this is off the back of what we discussed at TCM a few months ago. I feel like at times we're going round and round in circles on this because we keep coming back to, and it's not our fault, and I'm not blaming Central Beds really either, but their position seems to be, we'll get a list, and then we can talk about that list. And the worry that I've always had with that list is every list has sort of low-hanging fruit. It has our version of what we would see as a priority, and that might not chime with central beds. And so we don't get a joined up view of what the town centre could and should look like. So, you know, I'm minded, I like these recommendations, to be fair. So to review the draft town centre and surrounding areas master plan, and to commission a graphic designer to look at the future layout of the market square. But I'm almost minded before that to go back to central beds and say, yeah, we've got a list, but there's only one item on it. And that is that we want to have a vision for the market square, including its layout, where the trees are going to be replanted, and with the closure of the bus exit lane with a plan for Century House. That's it. Like, it's not more complicated than that. So if they want a list, that's the list. How do we have a discussion about the one item that's on it? I'm loathed for us to spend money on a graphic designer on, you know, getting a plan for an asset that we don't own, and that there seems to be some reluctance to discuss at a strategic level or in any detail. So I'm not going to make a proposal at this point, although actually I might test the water and see. I propose that we write back to central beds saying that we only have one aspiration for this list as outlined.
Oh, now I need to ask for a seconder. Councillor Thomas, thank you. Okay, Councillor Strawn, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I noticed that the Chief Executive at CBC recently suggested senior management of BTC and CBC should meet on a regular basis to progress talks. Have any such meetings been arranged yet, or if not, when are they going to be arranged, or the approach made to the Chief Executive to follow this through? Because it's nice to see that the Chief Executive has suggested this. In fact, I welcome it, and I think it's about time. So I would hope that our senior officers are making that approach very quickly, because I think the sooner it starts, the better.
Mr. Hussain?
Yeah, thanks. So that's indeed the case that CBC have made that move, in fact, and they hold their meetings monthly at their level, and they are minded to come. They've opened up the list of dates going forward for several months. My understanding is the first one that we have agreed to attend, that diaries coincide, is in June of this year, and that's what's happening.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Russell.
Well, I totally disagree with what's just been proposed. And I'm not very happy with just calling it a market square vision. I think it needs to go wider. It is the town centre, which is wider than just the market square. I'd like to point out straight away in the first bullet point of the recommendation that the draft Biggleswade Town Centre and surrounding areas master plan is not what it's called. It's the Biggleswade Town Centre Master Plan, and it is a formal supplementary planning document. So we can look at it and we can pick things out from it that we want, but we cannot change it. And I'm not surprised that central beds don't want to change it. But although it's as old as it is still part of the formal planning framework for Biggleswade, alongside the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. I think what we want to do is to get our heads around how we want the town centre to work in a wider way. I like the idea of the 2 half-day workshops to try and get this wider vision. I'm not minded to comply with what senior CBC officer wants about a list. That's just a few aspirations so that they can then do what they like and work the plans out themselves. But before we can start that conversation with Central Bedfordshire, we need to be clear what we want to do. And I agree with the officers that the master plan and the neighbourhood plan are good places to start, but also there is an awful lot of knowledge within the body of town councillors about what might need to happen, what's worked well with the town centre, what hasn't. And it comes back to what we were discussing a moment ago about bus routes and all the rest of it. We have an idea of where we might want bus stops to be, but we need to think a bit wider about that. We need to think about the bus standing in Church Street was mentioned, but I would think for a start, some of the bus standing should happen at the transport interchange when it opens. But I can understand why Central Bedfordshire are talking to the bus operators at the moment, because some of them will not want to come up to the transport interchange as part of their circuit because it will make their journeys longer. So we need to be aware of that. So I would prefer to see us make a decision tonight to simply go ahead with the workshops and to try to put together a good vision for the town centre, not just for the market square, based on thinking that's been done before, but what we all know has happened since in the last few years. Thank you. Thank you.
If I could make an observation, I think the risk with workshops is that we could end up with a very long list of aspirations. And I think sort of almost in the way that Councillor Fage was suggesting, what we probably want is quite a short list of aspirations. But I think there is value in having a workshop to agree that vision, but just making sure that we don't turn it into something with an unnecessarily broad scope. It needs to be focused. Councillor Russell.
Well, you start with a long list of what might happen and you refine it. So that's what the workshops would do. And then we can see whether there are things there that we can implement ourselves as a town council, or whether we need to work with Central Bedfordshire. And I mean, although Central Bedfordshire own our market square, there may be things that we can do, or certainly we need to be very clear. And I think I'm going to say something a bit naughty, but if we could have this in place by the May elections, then there may be a better opportunity to take things forward as Central Beds.
Okay, any other comments before we vote on the first proposal? Councillor Fage.
Okay, so I misspoke. I didn't mean just like just the paved area and the market square. We can obviously, I think that the town centre as a whole is important. I actually don't think that this is a million miles away from what I was actually proposing. I just didn't propose it very well, because actually if we do have a half-day workshop and we come to a specific vision about, okay, so when the bus exit lane closes, where exactly do we want the trees, given that that is actually probably quite a time contingent conversation to have, given that we've said we'd like them replaced by the end of the year. We obviously need to come to a view before that. So maybe now is actually a good time. Similar comments about where buses should move and potentially a plan for Century House. So actually, I don't think that's a million miles away from what I was proposing, but if I could reword it then. So I propose that we move ahead with the first proposal. I don't think we necessarily need 2 half-day workshops. Should we start with 1 and see where we go before we all burn through our annual leave? And so to propose we go ahead with the workshop for a 1 half-day workshop where we come up with a list of specific aspirations, but in the context of a vision for the market square, specifically including what happens if and when we can close the bus exit lane, what happens to Century House, either used or whatever, where trees should go, and broader conversations about town centre and market square layout.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, are you still happy to second that?
Yeah, it's along the lines of what I expect.
Okay. Any other comments, or shall we go to the vote? Okay, Councillor Russell.
I'm assuming that we're not agreeing to the recommendation on the second bullet point. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, is that clear? Okay, so who's in favour of the proposal as set out, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us to item 9C, which is the paper we have on the big eats. I'll just draw members' attention to the following item, which is Street Food Heroes. So there is something of a relationship between these two potential events because they're of a similar nature. But I think based on guidance from the committee previously to prioritise the big eats, it makes sense to debate that, and then based on the outcome of that, move on to the Street Food Heroes. Mr. Lord, did you have any updates on this paper? Okay, to the floor then, please. Councillor Fage.
I'll go first again then. Okay, so firstly, thank you for this. And I'm quite excited by this actually, because if I do jump the gun and start to get ahead and look at what the next item is on this agenda, I've felt for a little while that we need to bring some of this back into our control. I like the idea of not having an event that coincides with times that are high footfall in the town centre anyway. And by high, I mean, we always want it to be higher, but relatively high. So the first or second Friday of the month is higher footfall than, say, any given Thursday. So we should be trying to target those days where footfall is lower in order to remind people that the town centre is there, the experience, get them to pop into other businesses as well when they might not otherwise be benefiting as much. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with this broadly, but with a couple of changes in my view. I wonder whether monthly is a little too often for an event like this and just dilutes it a little bit. I think it's hard to get people to turn up to things every single month. Whereas if we were to have concentrated effort every other month, test the water, check that it works, then we could have a second discussion maybe this time next year about whether we do look to move to monthly. And we've got something to compare to then, given that Street Food Heroes has been monthly in the past. So I'd propose that we adopt this, but aim for bi-monthly events and Thursdays rather than Wednesdays. I think it's Wednesdays in here, if I'm not mistaken. I think we should aim for Thursdays. That's basically Friday Eve. People are starting to get roughly into the weekend mood. And I think we can capitalise on that. So subject to it being on a Thursday and every other month, I'd propose that we go with this. One more thing. I actually think the big eats works slightly better for grammatical reasons that Councillor Bond will be able to elaborate on, I'm sure. But when you're in the present version of a you have a noun and then you have a verb afterwards, and eats is the verb here. It eats this, he eats that. So I would actually go for the big eats. Maybe I'm going a bit deep there.
Thank you. To avoid ambiguity, does big have 1 or 2 G's?
Obviously, it has 2 G's. That's the way big should be spelled anyway.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just to follow on really. I think I like the idea of you know, the kind of street food kind of ideas, and I think to bring it back in house, I think it's very welcome. I was a little bit confused though reading the paper that we've been talking about Thursdays, but the dates were listed for Wednesday. So I just some clarification on that. I would support a Thursday over a Wednesday. So just some clarity on that would be helpful. I think the point around not already putting them on days where the town centre is already going to be busy is a good one, because we want to attract people on different dates. But I mean, maybe look, in terms of the frequency, we need to test the water on this and all the rest of it. But it may well be the frequency might be higher in the warmer months rather than you know, sort of June, July, August, rather than you know, March, April. Perhaps it's just another, you know, thing to think about maybe within that. But otherwise, no, I think it's great. It should hopefully bring a lot more interest of you know, people back into town, and certainly you know, a sort of 4 till 7 slot would bring families after school, that kind of stuff as well. So I think all power to your elbow, and thanks for bringing it back to the council.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Albo.
Yeah, just very minor one. The logo, I was wondering, excuse me. So the, well, it won't be the Bigs Eat, presumably, the Big Eats. So beneath that, the food truck festival, because it's in black font, seems to get a little lost in the trees. So I just wondered if that could be looked at. I also was wondering, do we need a postcode in there? It just seemed a bit superfluous to me, but that's just my opinion.
Councillor North. Could you put your mic on, please?
I would guess that the postcode is there for people sat nav. When we get people from all across the country coming to this, they will need the postcode to be able to find it.
I like your ambition. Councillor Strawn, were you indicating?
Yes, thank you. Let's need a little bit of clarification on the financing, because I'm wondering how we actually come to the figures here, because we may earn, in the middle paragraph of the summary, a minimum of £360 of additional income. And I think this is based on there being 8 traders there. So 8 times 50, which I think is the proposal, is £400. And then it's up to 540 on an 8 traders plus basis. So I don't understand the figures. Further, I don't understand why we need a environment of £50 towards this. This is meant to be self-funding. Yes, I suppose on a very short term, on the very initial one, if you were keeping it entirely within the house, you might have to have £50 up front. But that seems to me to be ridiculous. If we're making profit of £360, the £50 comes out of that, which reduces it to 310. And then when it comes to looking at the terms and conditions, the X will receive a payment in the form of foregoing the trader costs and receiving 10% of BTC's profits. What are our profits? How do we calculate that? It leaves, there's ambiguity here at the moment, which I would urge officers to look at, and look at the charges for the traders to come in the agreement. It's the principle's brilliant. I'm fully supportive of it, but I just don't think we've got our paperwork in order at the moment and the financial explanations in order. It needs, the terms and conditions need to be tidied up a bit and a bit clearer. Yes, the principle's brilliant, but I'm unhappy at presenting it in this term on a legal basis because I think it leads to a lot of uncertainty. I just don't understand what 10% of the profits is going to be and how do we calculate it?
It would probably be safer to say revenue rather than profit, wouldn't it? Mr. Law, did you want to respond to any of those points?
Yes, apologies. It was supposed to be revenue, not profits. When it comes to the £360 I thought we'd earn as a minimum, it should probably be 315, deducting £50 from the 400, assuming that one of the 8 traders is the person that's organising it, and then deducting £35 off that for 10% revenue, if that makes sense.
Just for clarification, if I've understood, it's revenue and we take £400 and 10% of £400, which is 40, which then would get it down to the 360 in terms of our income. But it's not clear in my view, and I may be unduly dense in that respect. I think it would be helpful if it was a little bit clearer to avoid ambiguity, not only for us councillors, but also for the traders and the people we're actually entering into the agreement with.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, if I could make one comment from the chair. So I think that there is a sentence in here which speaks about giving priority to regular market traders and also traders who are local to Biggleswade. I would like to see a little bit more detail about how we're going to actually ensure we achieve that. So, for example, we need to make sure it's promoted and that local businesses are aware of the opportunity to participate and that the door's really open. And I think that's really important because that's one of the big advantages in essentially organising our own event. Other than this, I think it's great. Okay, should we go to the vote then? So, who is in favour of?
Remind myself.
Yeah, do you want to remind people of? Proposal.
Yes, so the proposal was to go ahead with the big eats, changing the location of the S. However, we proceed on Thursdays rather than on Wednesdays, and that we do this in alternate months throughout 2022, or whatever year this is, 2023. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and thank you. I've just thought of a thing which I'll mention. So looking at the logo, I do wonder if having a truck is necessarily the most appropriate image if we actually anticipate there could be people trading from gazebos. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm worrying about that too much.
We can maybe discuss that operation with Councillor Knight. Maybe.
Okay, so who's in favour of the proposal as set out? Okay, and who is against? And I think we have 2 abstentions. Okay, that's carried then. Thank you very much. So that moves us to item 9C, where we have a paper on street food heroes. Mr. Lord, anything to add? I'll look to the room then. It's getting predictable, Councillor Fage.
Sorry, I don't think, given that we've just passed a resolution to proceed with bringing some of this in-house, having taken feedback from various businesses in the town, both those who are who provide food and those who don't, it's pretty clear that this event doesn't really work for them. I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but we now have it within our grasp to put on an event that really works for Biggleswade, and I think this one has sort of run its course. So I'd like to propose that we don't go ahead with any street food hero events throughout 2023.
Would anyone second that proposal? Councillor Woodhead. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, looks like we go straight to the vote on that then. So who's in favour of not proceeding with any Street Food Heroes events? Please raise your hand. And who is against? And who's abstaining? One abstention, thank you. That is therefore passed, thank you. And we have another written report, this time on buskers and street performers code of conduct. Is there anything Mr. Lord would like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There were just a couple of questions from the Chairman that I couldn't manage to squeeze into the report before it went out on the agenda. So one of them is relating to whether busking is within the council's jurisdiction. Just to clarify that it is not. This is just a voluntary code of conduct that we'd encourage performers to sign up to build a positive relationship between those in the industry and the council that we could use for future events. Another question was relating to whether the council owns a suitable noise meter. We don't at present, but they are available on websites for up to £20. Central Bedfordshire don't currently have a policy relating to this. And the final one was relating to the merchandise. Quite far down in the report, there's a reference to performers not being allowed to sell their own merchandise. And this is because it goes against the Vagrancy Act 1824 and the Local Government Act 1982. Thank you, that's it.
Very comprehensive, thank you. Any comments, please? Councillor Albo.
Yeah, just in the code of conduct on page 25 near the top, it talks about where the street performances will be situated, and it's in the northwest corner. I couldn't quite picture where that is meant to be. I wonder if we could know a little more.
Mr. Lord?
I didn't want to reference the business in the pack, but it would be just in front of DD's. Sort of near where Happy Days normally set up. Thank you.
Councillor Strong.
Just very much on that point, I think it'd be quite helpful if there's a little plan with the code of conduct showing where it is, but then there's conflict elsewhere in terms of saying they mustn't perform within 50 metres of each other. And it looks as though there's facility for them to perform in any other places on the market square other than that particular corner. So either they're meant to be there or they're not. And then if they're meant to be there, then it'd only be one at a time or one group of buskers. So that's a little bit of ambiguity in the wording. And I think we've got two lots of references to decibel levels, which I think is one of those can probably come out because I think they're virtually the same principle. I'm not an expert on decibels, but it just seems to be a repeat in the large majority of there. And I think it's just a little bit of ambiguity. I was just thinking if you're going to have the code of conduct and going to have a place that it's there, let's have the place set quite clearly. Otherwise, it's going to take you to the northwest corner and then they can perform all over the place. So what's the point?
That's a very sensible point. Any other comments? Councillor Page.
I propose that we accept this policy, but subject to removing the 5th paragraph under terms and conditions, beginning performances need to keep the overall decibel level, because that's repetitive of the one in the very first paragraph, and also subject to changing the second bullet point on page 25 to just striking through it and saying only one busker at a time.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a seconder for the proposal? Thank you, Councillor Woodhead. If I can make a comment from the chair, the last bullet on page 25, use of amplification or drums, I don't think we should disallow amplification for instruments that require amplification, like keyboards. So I think that needs a tiny bit of finessing. And it's quite common for people to sing with an amplifier as well. So I think not having drums is sensible. We have a noise limit, so I'm not sure we need to restrict amplification. Any other comments? Councillor Russell.
In answer to that, I'd say it depends what they're amplifying.
Yeah.
And then the decibel level is very important, because actually I've had a complaint from one of the businesses very near to the place that we're talking about. And a lot of that was down to amplification.
Okay, any other comments on the policy and the proposal? Councillor Page.
My only question is, have we have we had the opportunity to consult with nearby businesses, or are we sort of assuming that this northwest spot is, you know, sort of far away enough from most of them?
No, sorry, officers haven't done any consultation yet.
I wonder, I think it's a good policy, whether there's scope to introduce it for a trial period with the understanding that we may have to bring it back and revise it if there are any complaints.
It's a nice idea, actually. Should we propose it for now and then revisit at TCM in whenever that is in the new council?
That sounds straightforward. Okay, any further debate? Okay, let's take it to the vote then. Who's in favour of the proposal as set out by Councillor Fage? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And who's against? Nobody. And I think we have some abstentions. 1, 2. Thank you very much. And that is passed as well then. So that policy is approved until the next TCM meeting. The next item is 9E, which is commemorative plaques, benches and memorial policies. Mr. Lord, any updates on this, please?
Again, similar scenario to the previous report, in that there were some questions that Councillor Knight raised that I wasn't able to fit into the report. So the estimated cost of purchasing the plaque would be £50. Estimated cost of providing the bench would be £299. The estimated cost of maintaining the bench over 15 years, assuming 5% inflation each year, is £1,800. And that would be with staining taking place once a year, and the bench being included as part of the usual schedule of work for public realm.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to comment on the paper, please? Councillor Russell.
I like very much the designs of the benches, I have to say. I'm just wondering why we're limiting this to 15 years and why that figure is there, because you do see memorial benches around the place that have been in place a lot longer than that. And, you know, I wonder why it's necessary. Is it because there may be other people who want a memorial bench, or what's the reason?
Mr. Lord?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Councillor Russell. It's just to provide an opportunity if we become saturated in memorial benches across the town and we can't fit any more in, it's an opportunity for someone else to purchase a plaque. The bench would stay there providing it's in good enough condition.
I wonder if it said minimum rather than maximum, that would give some flexibility. So if there was pressure, it could be replaced after 15 years, and if there wasn't, it could be left in place. Councillor Russell.
Well, I was just going to say, in that case, somebody's bought a bench but can only have their plaque on it for 15 years, and then somebody else gets the advantage of having the bench. That seems a little bit, I'm not sure we're quite where we need to be on that. So, you know, I don't know what the solution is off the top, but I don't think that it's completely logical.
Okay, further comments, please. Councillor Strong.
Yes, I think we ought to have some mention that the wording on the plaques must be approved by the town council. I didn't see that. My eyesight didn't show it in the proposal, but if we are going to have plaques on benches, I think we've got to make sure that the wording is appropriate, because otherwise somebody could come along and pay their money and we might get a plaque that has something that is totally unsuitable. So I think that's unlikely, but I think we must have that right.
Very good point. Thank you. Councillor Fage.
I was going to say something similar, actually, that the approval of the wording and the location should be, I mean, I think that should and could be at the discretion of officers, but we should say that. So, I mean, the other thing that jumped out at me, and I know I say this at the moment as mayor, but this kind of initiative is something that we need to price it in the right way, such that we're not completely, you know, pricing people out of having a bench, but also at the same time not making it so that every Tom, Dick and Harry can have a bench and we become saturated with benches. And I was wondering whether, and it will be too late for my year as mayor, but this is the kind of initiative that we would look to include in the policy, a donation to the mayor's charities as being seen as something to, perhaps a slice of this goes towards the mayor's charities, because we shouldn't be trying to make money out of this particularly. Yes, it needs to wash its face for the council, but that extra charitable element, I think if it were one of my family members that died, and I was looking to have a memorial bench for them, that would make that price probably at about the right level, but also soften it a little bit, knowing that the money's going to a good cause. I don't have a proposal, but I just wanted those 3 points sort of noted.
I think the figures that were mentioned, it sounds like actually over the course of 15 years, the maintenance of the bench would actually cost more than someone's paid for the bench. So there is no profit in that figure. Councillor Strawn.
It actually just goes on to a further point, I think, in terms of the council can't accept liability for vandalism, etc., which I think is quite right. But then the people who've paid their money for 15 years, the bench gets vandalised after a couple of weeks. They spend a lot of money, and they're going to be asked to replace it, repair it, etc. I think we do need to look at whether there's a means of the equivalent of insurance for that, so that's it. Because I don't think you can require somebody who's paid £1,600 to then fork out another £1,600 a couple of weeks later because it's been vandalised. I think that is totally and utterly unreasonable. So I think we have got to look at that. I appreciate the reason we can't be responsible for it, but equally, somebody's providing something which hopefully will be a benefit to the town, and then they've just been expected to pay for the repairs for it regardless. That, I think, is morally wrong.
Further comments, please. Councillor Fage.
Okay, I'll make a proposal. I agree. The way I see this is it's almost like a gift to the town, if you like, and it's in agreement with the officers and bound by this policy. But if people have a memorial bench, I don't think they should be passing that, be accepting full liability on for it. So I propose that do we have the power to accept this policy, or are we recommending this to council? Do we know that?
That's a good question, Mr. Hussaini.
I'm not entirely sure, I'm afraid.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to have to take an action on that.
Yeah, so I think we should be cautious and recommend this to council.
Yes.
And let's err on the side of caution,
Okay.
particularly as we're dealing with 4-figure numbers here. Potentially multiple if we're looking at several benches. So I propose that we recommend this policy to council, subject to wording included around approval of the final location of the bench is at the discretion of officers, and approval of the final wording is at the discretion of officers, and changes to the wording around who accepts liability if something happens to the bench. I'm going to push my luck and say subject to as well, then making a £100 donation to the mayor's charities. That being included in the policy.
That does mean the policy will come back to council, so we'll have an opportunity to see that final wording. Is someone willing to second that proposal, please? Councillor Woodhead, I think, was just pipped to the post by Councillor Strawn.
If I say, providing we make it quite clear that we expect when recommendation comes to council for that wording on the liability element to be firmed up so that it is we actually treat those who are donating to the town fairly.
Okay, Councillor Russell.
Could we check whether these benches would be covered under our insurance
That's a
policy?
good
Because
question.
that would solve the issue.
Maybe that can come back to the council as well. That would be good. Okay, any further comments before we go to the vote? Okay, so who's in favour of the proposal as set out? And who's against? And who's abstaining? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Right, that takes us on to 9F, which is surprisingly another written report from the place shaping manager. This time it's on footfall monitoring devices. Mr. Lord, any updates, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So it's just to amend the recommendation and to reflect that officers should seek whether Section 106 funding could be used, and otherwise the project could proceed this financial year with £4,000 drawn from the election provision allocation, as a by-election is highly unlikely before the 31st of March, and then the remaining £1,000 being absorbed from the general budget.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to open the debate? Thank you, Councillor Strawn.
Well, no, I'm not prepared to make a recommendation or proposal at this stage. I have some concerns over this. the Market Square area of coverage, if we would go ahead for it, is very limited. It is quite literally to the Market Square. It's not the town centre, which to my mind is actually a pointless exercise, just doing it on the area of the Market Square. And frankly, I don't think we've got the money to spend this amount of money on footfall. We're getting dangerously close to becoming Big Brother state on this with the footfall because of the monitoring through apps, etc., mobile phone. Fortunately, I have got a mobile phone which is not smart, so hopefully it'll never ever pick me up. But I think it's actually just one step too far on this. So I personally have got very grave reservations over it, and I don't think we can afford it as a council at the moment. It's a big expense over a long period of time, and the area for coverage isn't the right area, and it's just too much like Big Brother.
Councillor Bond.
Well, listening to Councillor Strawn, I think I tend to agree with him, and I'd like to propose that we basically reject this and consider it in next financial year.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that proposal? I had a feeling we might. Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Any further views? Councillor Albo.
Yeah, I agree it shouldn't go forward, certainly at the moment, because I'm not entirely sure what we'd use this data for. It's not clear what we'd do with it. So until we do know what we want to do with it, I don't really see the point of actually undertaking this at all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor North.
Just to clarify, are you proposing this is mounted on the side of a building somewhere? It's measuring the number of people who cross this boundary into the Market Square. Is that the idea?
Mr. Lord.
It's to capture all individuals that are in that area at any one time. It's not necessarily crossing over the boundary. It's individuals in the area.
Take a view every sort of 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
How many people are in that area at this point?
Yes.
And at that point and at that point.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Councillor Albo.
Yeah. Thinking through what I just said, I guess one good use for it will be actually monitoring the number of people at events in the Market Square. That's the only use I can think of it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Did I see Councillor Fage indicating?
Yes. I'm a little perplexed by some of the numbers here. So if I look at supplier B, it says that what's the installation cost of around 17. The company provides Wi-Fi solution for town centres, which could be no, I beg your pardon, I'm not confused by the cost. Okay, so we're looking at either £8,000 or £5,000, depending on whether we went with supplier B or C. If we're looking at capital costs, I wouldn't expect this. I'd expect that to come from section 106. So if it's viable and if it's sensible, and if there's a case for it, I wouldn't want this paid for in any other way personally, given that there's section 106 available for the town centre. So perhaps there's an action there, regardless of whether or not this is something that we want to pursue at this point, at least figuring out whether this kind of initiative could be covered by section 106. If it can't, I'd be raising an eyebrow for sure. I can see the benefit of it though, because whilst it's obviously going to be very difficult to cover all of the town centre, or potentially very expensive to cover all of the town centre, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. And so if we were to invest in some kind of initiative, how do we know whether or not we've got good value for money out of that initiative and whether it's worth repeating? The cost of 5,000, but so even the weekly market, for example, as we try to expand it, take on more traders, try to figure out where peak times are, what would we use that data for? Well, if we can spot trends, we can potentially play to those when seeking to set policy. So, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but we might be at risk of we might be a little bit surprised at the quality of the data that comes back, and subsequently what we could look to do with it once it's available. And for £5,000, which I think could be sourced by 106, I'm not 100%, but I'm more comfortable with this than I thought I would be.
Councillor Russell.
Looking at the area that's being covered, according to the diagram, lots of people might come into the town centre and never cross that area. Walk down the high street, cross at the bottom of Station Road, walk along Marketplace on the south side, and that doesn't appear to be covered here. So what are we actually achieving by covering that area? I mean, I've always thought we have talked about this sort of thing before, 3 or 4 years ago, or perhaps even more. And we were talking about monitoring the people coming into the town centre, which means the access points to the town centre. This doesn't seem to be the right way forward at all. So I think I'm fully supportive of the proposal and would want this deferred until such time as we've got a better idea of what we're trying to do.
Okay, I think Mr. Hussain is indicating, then I'd like to make a contribution, then I'll go to Mr.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, no, just in response to Councillor Russell's comments around the map and the coverage, it actually the map should extend to cover Marketplace and the other side, the sort of, the east side of the pavement area in front of all the shop units as well. So it would cover that whole area. It wouldn't just be the bit it doesn't, but it should have done. Yeah. Sorry.
So I think I'm aligned to a lot of what Councillor Fage said. So I worry that we do talk about trialling different initiatives, investing in the market, potentially running a bus to the retail park. And the challenge with anything we may try, we don't have any metrics to really tell whether it's working or not. I do worry that the capital cost is quite significant, but I share the view that if it could be funded through 105, then that would be the way to proceed. And the revenue cost of 600 a year isn't so unacceptable to me. So I think maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe there are some concerns that we need to address. I thank officers for taking the time to come up with a really concrete proposal. I think it is something that this council should look to do, or that central beds should look to do. Both organisations don't need to do it, but we know town centres are generally struggling. We're very lucky in this town centre at the moment that we don't have that many vacant units, but I think it's a constant battle, and having a good way to monitor the activity in the town, even if it's not perfect, is something that we should look to do. Councillor North.
Well, I was just going to say, perhaps partly in response to what Councillor Russell is saying, that, I mean, the more I think about it, the more this does seem like a very good idea, actually. And so I was in that to the extent, really, make very similar comments to Councillor Fage. But in answer to it's not measuring everybody, well, it's not. And on a particular measure, the number it comes up with is sort of meaningless, really. And what you're doing is saying, well, that is a sort of indicator. The number of people in that area is an indicator of the number of people that are in the town centre as a whole. So if there are a lot more people in there on a particular day, you might assume they're in the town centre as a whole. It also allows for comparisons, as Councillor Fage said, with if you're having a particular event there, like how many, for example, the Tuesday market often has very few stalls, although it may be different these days, but if the number of people in that area on a Tuesday morning is the same as it is on a Monday morning, then you've got to ask about whether the Tuesday market is successful or not, haven't you? For example, or if you had some other sort of event, you get an indicator of whether it's succeeding or not. It's not the numbers are irrelevant, really. They're just there for comparison purposes. And it's just an indicator. And obviously, if you had something that was, I don't know, way away from this area, then it wouldn't really give you the answer. But that's true of any sort of machine, any sort of automated measuring. There are some things that it's not going to measure properly, and you would need to know that before you start. But it does seem to me that it would be, for the cost, which, despite what people have said, I think is fairly modest, actually. I would think it is a worthwhile thing to do.
Yes, I think it's the trend that's important, not the absolute figure. And if you think about a 10-year service life, Councillor Russell.
I'm a bit surprised to hear people saying that, this is a modest cost. We've just set our precept for next year, and we took out of the budget a lot of things that were far more worthwhile than this because we didn't have the money. And we're being told that we could use the elections heading from the current year's budget for this. I'm sure it was going to be used for something else when we were discussing the budget, but I can't quite remember what. So the more I think about it, the more I'm against going anywhere with this.
Okay, I think Councillor Fage wanted to speak, and then we should vote on the proposal.
So the proposal is to defer this, and part of it was on the grounds of finances. Is that a fair summary of the proposal at the moment, which I think I can understand that from a certainly current year budget point of view. Perhaps we could just consider maybe one amendment, maybe two amendments. So yes, defer it and don't make a decision tonight, but instruct officers just to inquire whether or not this is something that could be funded by 106. Sorry, others are shaking their heads, but that's not a revenue item for us. So there's no harm in having a look, and if it can't, then that's the end of the conversation. But then secondly, it seems like Leighton and Linslade do something similar. I know they're using an option that isn't the recommendation here, but it'd be curious to know what they use that data for, and if they haven't been using it long enough to know, that's okay. And if they say, actually, we wish we hadn't spent this money in the first place, and it's a big white elephant that wastes our time, then that's useful for us as well. But if we were to do two of those things, it doesn't shut off the conversation, it doesn't commit us to anything at all.
Councillor Bond, are you willing to accept those amendments?
I think we should leave this just as I've said before. It was we said that actually, but let's
That's a no. Councillor Strong.
There's nothing wrong with the officers looking at the funding and looking at what's happened elsewhere. That's the whole purpose of deferring it, so that when it comes back, the funding will be possibly clearer. And at that stage, it will be the next council that can make the decision. But we haven't got the money in the budget, I don't think, for this year, and for any number of reasons. I think now we've had a good discussion. I think we should be looking to put the vote.
Okay, to the vote then, please. Who's in favour of the proposal as set out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and who's against? 1, 2, 3. The proposal wins. Okay, thank you.
No, Ian put the proposal.
I didn't hear the question, but
I think one of the councillors wasn't clear on what the proposal was, Chairman.
so we were voting on Councillor Bond's proposal to defer, and you voted in favour of it. Was that a mistake?
No. I'm happy to defer, yes.
I don't think your vote materially will have changed the outcome with the numbers.
I think you'll find it would.
Would it?
Yes, because it would have been 4-4 and you'd have had the casting vote.
We've done the vote. Let's carry on.
Oh, okay. We've done the vote, so I think we'll stick with the answer. I think the mood of the room was clear on that one. That is also true. Let's move on. So item 9G is the King's coronation. Another report from the place shaving manager.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So just a very brief update. Officers have completed an application for funding through the National Lottery, with thanks to Councillor Strawn for pointing that out. They didn't have a strict deadline. It was mid-February, and officers did submit it mid-February. So hopefully we've met the deadline. We're waiting to hear back.
Okay. Councillor Russell.
I'm in favour of the recommendation, except that I'm somewhat concerned about the second paragraph under coronation big lunch. Says bunting left over from the Jubilee celebrations would be put up using a BTC owned cherry picker to be purchased. At what cost, from what budget? And I come back to the fact that we have just set a very difficult precept, and if we needed a cherry picker, it should have been one of the options put forward.
Are either of the officers able to clarify that, please? Mr. Hussaini.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I can confirm that that option for a used cherry picker, I think it was for up to £2,500 is the amount, was discussed by members in the past and agreed and approved. So that's that is no, that's for the it is for the new budgets from April.
Could you put your mic on if you want to respond? Mike, if you're responding. Councillor Russell, I thought you wanted to respond. I'm just asking you to put your mic on.
I'm just saying, I'm amazed. I've looked at those budget papers. I've been in no end of meetings, and there's nowhere where I remember seeing a cherry picker. So perhaps some officers could put me right offline.
Okay, that sounds sensible. Okay, further comments, please. Councillor Woodhead.
Yeah, I think overall this is a good idea, notwithstanding the concerns that Councillor Russell has. I mean, just two quick points. One, I'm aware there is also a competing event at Shuttleworth on the same day on the Sunday. So in terms of local attendance and all the rest of it, but so that's just something just to be aware of. And in terms of, how can I put it, recycling things from the Jubilee, etc. Can we just make sure there's no Jubilee branding or anything that's still left? And if it's Union Jacks, that's fine, but clearly you know, in terms of the way the chronology of these things work, is we don't really want to be advertising the Jubilee anymore for obvious reasons. So it just needs to be as plain Union Jack stuff as possible. I believe there is a new logo that's come out for the coronation, so I suspect nearer the time there'll be official logos that we can use on bunting or flags, whatever else we want to put up. But otherwise, no, I think it's going to be a good, good idea, and hopefully the town will support it.
Councillor Fage.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the paper. How do we know that there's demand for this? If we had a way of maybe monitoring football, for example, over the Jubilee weekend, we'd have been able to see whether or not, you know, how much appetite there was for an event like this. And we did run one which was pretty similar. The first one on the Thursday evening was very, very well attended. Demand exceeded supply. We were limited to 500 people and we had to stop them coming in. On the Jubilee, in fact, we did monitor footfall. We clicked people in and we clicked people out. And did we get to 200 maybe? I don't know, at most, at a push. So I'm not convinced that, you know, when it was the evening and there was a draw of the beacon, I could see why people would, but I wonder whether people are going to be more interested in, I just wonder whether people are going to be more interested in doing street parties. I don't know. I don't know what the mood is like. I can't remember the last Jubilee. Not Jubilee, coronation.
That is the challenge.
I genuinely don't know. But I would be, if it were me, I am not sure that I, as a member, am going to have the time or energy over the next few months to input into this. But if there are others who will to join that working group, then go for it. But I was part of the Jubilee one. I won't have time or effort, energy to put into this one, I'm afraid.
Understood. Further comments, please. Councillor North.
Just one comment. I mean, it would, just to pick up on the point made by Councillor Fage again. While it would be disappointing if nobody turned up, I think the downside in terms of cost is to the council is very minimal, isn't it? It's just a certain amount of staff time moving chairs and tables about, but we're not providing the food ourselves, are we? So the downside is very small financially.
Yeah, I think the big contribution is street parties are quite bureaucratic to organise, aren't they? If you follow the rules, and that has certainly been an impediment, I think. And one thing we're really providing here is a space where people can come and celebrate. Further comments? Councillor Woodhead.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't what necessarily has been recommended in the paper, but I think, Councillor Fage is correct in that we don't have any particular way of measuring or assessing how popular it will be, but neither did we for the Jubilee, and we took a punt, and actually the Thursday one particularly was successful. I suspect that the other one we put forward was less successful, partly due to the weather, I think, which of course is another factor we don't have any control over. May can be completely hit and miss. It could be a fantastic weekend and, you know, everyone will want to come out, or it may not be, and there's not a lot we can kind of do about that. My hunch is actually that people will want to do something on the Saturday afternoon after watching the coronation on TV in the morning. They will then probably want to come out in the afternoon, but that isn't, I know that's not what's being suggested here, but I have a feeling that's where I think the weekend will go. And then the Sunday and the Monday, people do different things, but that's just an entirely personal opinion on that one.
Councillor Strawn.
I think the key to the success of this is not only what we're offering, but also the marketing and letting people know that it's happening, because it's not footfall. We can't do it on past events. It's going to be what turns up on the day, and that is making sure that people know that it's happening, and it's happening well in advance, so that people can plan to come to it. So the important thing is actually to people to know about it, because if they don't know about it, they won't turn up.
I wonder if we're allowed to use the beacon. Any further comments? If not, we're looking for a proposal. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bond, thank you. Okay, further comments before we vote? So let's vote on the proposal to accept the recommendation then. Who's in favour? That's a clear majority. Who's against? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Motion passed. Now, Christmas light switch on planning. Any updates, Mr.
No, thanks, Chairman.
Any comments on the Christmas event paper, please? Councillor North.
No, I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, I would just like clarification on what is meant by a child holding area.
Would Mr. Lord like to respond to that?
For the last Christmas event, we had gazebos positioned at either end of the stage that worked relatively well, but it could have been better from a safeguarding perspective, which I think is what this comment is alluding to make it a bit more secure.
Councillor Russell.
Just ask a question. I'm sorry if I don't know the jargon, but what does officers would recommend the delta is invested? What's the delta? And then it's repeated again, investing the delta in hiring a synthetic ice rink. What is that jargon?
Mr. Lord.
Apologies, this is referring to the difference between the budget and the emerging costs in figure 1.
And that's called the delta?
Sorry, I should have perhaps called it variance or something different.
Okay.
Councillor Fage.
Okay, so thank you for this. And actually, do you know, I like particularly the first recommendation to undertake an online survey, because, you know, what's the worst that can happen? We get a bit of feedback that we can either take on board, and maybe it prompts us to think something we hadn't thought before, or, you know, we don't necessarily have to do anything with it. And it feels like, given that we've got the website, we've got the functionality, shouldn't be a huge amount of time to collect and present that. So I think that's very sensible. There's a few things here though that I would just rule out now. So a fenced off area holding children. No, sorry, we're paying for a stage. Get on the stage or don't perform. You know,
I think you may be misunderstanding it. So the idea is when the children come off the stage,
right,
so there's a controlled area where the parents can collect them. So
right, that's different. Sorry, I thought this was referring to. I thought this was. Beg your pardon. Sorry, everybody's so offended. I thought this was referring to having a fenced off area where people could perform, which is what we have had in the past. So rather than being on the stage. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. I'm broadly supportive of children having a safe space to be picked up by their parents. I'd like that minuted, please. A suggestion to rename it to the Biggleswade Lights Up. I don't think it needs rebranding. I think that's a solution in search of a problem. But on the two more things, so probably more importantly, this year there will be fewer trees to put lights on. And we have been quite dependent on the trees. And I think they've worked really well, particularly the coloured lights this year. But if we're going to have a similar effect next year, we're going to need to find an alternative, because those trees are not going to be there to have lights in. So I think we need to proceed with that. And finally, we only bought the grotto a few years ago, and I'm really quite frustrated that it's now in a state where it's not able to be used. Maybe it was a poor purchase in the first place, or maybe it hasn't been treated properly. I don't know, but it feels like a huge amount of effort for something that doesn't really offer that good an experience. So I'd actually move that we accept the 2 recommendations as laid out, but add on to that we support officers looking into options around lighting, and start looking into that now to replace those which would go into the trees which are no longer there. Also that we make the decision not to proceed with the grotto this year.
I wonder if it would be possible to fix some low-cost projectors, almost the domestic kind that people use sometimes, to some of the lighting columns to try to make up for the lack of trees that we have. Perhaps as an idea. Councillor Woodhead, then Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I'm glad we got clarification around the holding pen for children, but I think I knew what it was meant, but it was perhaps a bit clumsy language. Like Councillor Fage, I'm a bit disappointed around the whole grotto kind of thing. I think I was involved in recommending we got one in the first place, and it's not lasted very long. I'm concerned the way obviously it's been dealt with. Maybe it's time this coming year to try the ice rink idea as suggested and have a reset. I think grottos can be done well. I think it's a bit of an excuse actually, but I think they can be done well if there's some thought put into it. But let's maybe try something different this year and see how that goes. Prepared to sort of accept that. What was the other point I had as well? I think, yeah, I got a lot of feedback from neighbours, residents, etc. About the event. I think Queenagy as well went down particularly well, and also Biggleswade Air Cadets really enjoyed being involved and helping with the fundraising and the buckets and stuff as well. And I think they appreciated being involved in a much broader community event as well. So I think that's I think they would be very happy, I think, to help next time around as well.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
We were talking, I think this report is saying that we would have the links across the road, but we wouldn't have any of the whatever the jargon is on the lampposts.
Motifs,
thank you. The trouble is there's that big hole at the bottom of Station Road. I mean, I thought it looked quite odd this year because we had the lights across the road and then we had the motifs at the bottom of Station Road. It spoilt the whole effect because it was too bitty. So, you know, I think we need to think quite hard, quite quickly, because we need to get the order in for the lights that we want. But I think that we've not only got the problem of not having the trees, so we've got gaps there where the trees were, but we've got, what do you do then at the bottom of Station Road? Because it's quite important in the market square and we need something there. I don't have a solution at the moment, but I'm pointing out that there's an issue.
Mr. Lord, are you able to comment on that issue around the roundabout at all, please?
Perhaps we could look for motifs that are in keeping with the festoon lighting. So we go out, we look for quotes for the specific colour code that the festoon is, so then it would match better.
I think the challenge there is the span, isn't it? So actually trying to find something that could reach across the road in that area is quite challenging. Councillor Thomas and Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you. I had a lot of reports back from people saying they thought the lights were much better this year than previous years. And that's usually from people who've been in Biggleswade a long time. Also, I remember that it was Councillor Mark Knight who managed to capture Queenagy for free because I was with him at the time and we were at Bolstock and we talked to the lead singer there and we had a chat with him and we kind of persuaded him at the time to do it for nothing. So thanks to Mark Knight, we saved Councillor Knight, we saved £1,000. I was going to say something else, I can't remember now. Sorry.
Councillor Woodhead.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just thanks for another go. It's just a quick one around the sort of fairground area and the children's sort of fairground. Again, I think it was very well received. I just don't know if there can be some thought around the layout to it, because I know that there is a keenness by the fairground operator to also put food bits where the children's playground, children's fairground is, and it makes it extremely tight with people with young children holding hands, getting lost near the road, push chairs, and it just crams too much into a fairly small space. I think it should be rides only and food somewhere else. I think just in terms of being very strict in terms of layout. I think people are happy to queue for the rides and whatever, but cramming more things in there as well, I think it's not very helpful. You know, potentially a bit of a squeeze, but something to think about.
I note that we haven't really had sort of a post-mortem on the Christmas event, and maybe it's worth a half-hour Zoom call just to gather everyone's feedback in the same way that we're looking at doing a survey. If I could comment on the survey with the community, I think it's a good idea. I guess I'd like to see it a little bit structured. So not just asking for feedback, but maybe there is an opportunity to test some of the ideas we have. So I don't know whether an ice rink's viable this year, next year, but it would be worth asking people whether that's something they would support, and any other ideas we have as a way of trying to anticipate what may or may not be successful. Councillor Strawn, are you indicating?
Thank you, Chairman. I think your idea about actually targeting the questions as well as having general comments makes sense. That way we can get some direction. But clearly this is going to have to come back to the next TCM. We can all make our comments. I think we made a lot of comments tonight, which hopefully the officers have found helpful. But I don't think there's much point of going much further. I'll just make the one comment of my own. When walking down towards the town centre from the southern end, it was lovely to see the lights across the road. It actually made you feel you're going into something warm and welcoming before you even got to the town centre. So I think that was a success. And it goes back to what used to happen years ago. But everybody else has had their say, so I thought I'd just have mine as well. But I think the officers have got enough to work on now to come back to the next town centre management meeting, which will be with a new council.
Okay, Councillor Russell, and then I think we need a proposal and vote.
With Councillor Strawn saying what he said, the one thing that was missing this last year was that we weren't able to do anything in Station Road or in Hitchin Street or in the top of Shortmead Street, or indeed the other side of the Stratton Street, High Street Bridge. Sorry, Stratton Street is old. You know, up towards Stratton House Hotel and the Red Lion. So, you know, can we manage to do something that it starts to incorporate the whole of the town centre? I keep going back to the whole of the town centre rather than just the Market Square area. And I've got a question, please. If we use the Delta to hire a synthetic rink, it's only going to be for a few days. So what would the what would we be planning? When would the rink be available?
Mr. Lord, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that would come back with a business plan to the next TCM as to whether members would be minded to charge for the ice rink, what 3-day period it would need to be on, etc.
Yeah, you could certainly imagine it may be possible to have a business plan where it washes its face if it's successful.
I wasn't thinking about the business plan so much as physically, when was it going to be? Because it can't be on the night the lights switch on. So between then and Christmas itself, when would we want to have it? And I think we need to think what might be most appropriate, as well as having the business plan that Mr. Lord's talking about.
Yeah, it'd certainly be a very nice way of bringing people into the town to spend money in the shops and the leisure facilities as well. Any further comments? Councillor Fage.
I think I did make a proposal.
You did?
Yeah. So if I just summarise, then I think the idea of a post-mortem Zoom call is a good idea. So initiate with that, and then the 2 recommendations as set out, alongside deciding not to go ahead with the grotto this year, but in light of what Councillor Russell says as well, looking urgently at what options are available, given that we're not going to have the trees there to fill those gaps and to make sure that what we have is at least as good as last year and preferably better. So filling the gaps that we had this year, i.e. Station Road, Shortmead Street, Hitchin Street, and along the High Street. Starting to look at that sooner rather than later.
And this year the Christmas tree was excellent and there was no controversy, which is brilliant. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Lots, thank you. Who's in favour of the proposal? And that's unanimous, thank you. That concludes items for consideration. So we move on to items for information. So the first one is to look at the letter we've had from Central Beds Council in relation to CCTV. Any comments? Councillor Russell.
I suppose, being frustrated of Biggleswade, how long do we go on with this? Particularly given you've just asked for another item to come on the agenda. Maybe we should discuss both items together, because I think that we're going to have a real problem with vandalism the way things are at the moment. And I think more so since I was actually approached by a police officer Thursday evening when I was just outside the town hall here to ask if I had seen any young people dressed all in black, because a group of young people dressed all in black had been on the roofs of Poundland and some of the other shops throwing stones at passers-by. So, you know, we need to get on with this. And I'm almost beginning to wonder whether we should just fork out the money that's required and get the flipping line in place and get the system up and running. I'm not actually making a proposal on that. I'd like to hear what other people are saying, but, you know, given the other vandalism and given that we might need to think about extending the CCTV to protect our assets, because I worry about what's happened at Franklin's and therefore what might happen once the new equipment's in place and whether there would be vandalism to the new equipment. I'll stop there and I'll hear what.
Just before I go to Councillor North, so I mean, just an observation on the response we've had. To my mind, it demonstrates that the person who responded, the officer who responded to that letter, didn't really understand what we were asking, because the response said, we can't hand over the title of the line because we still need it. Our letter was saying, we understand you still need it and we're willing to guarantee that that line will have continuity. So I think there's a lack of understanding. And I have spoken to 2 Central Beds councillors who have both agreed to go and speak to that officer. That hasn't, I'm not sure that's happened yet, but that is something that I think we can and should do to try to really push for that level of understanding. Councillor North.
Yeah, well, I obviously don't disagree that you should try to get through this. But what if you know how long do you want? You know, a week. You know, if you haven't got through in that time, then what would the cost be? Can you remind us all what the cost would be of going it alone on this?
Looking at officers.
So it would be the setup cost of setup will be 9,000, just under £10,000 capital.
So these are additional costs
as a new customer. Additionally, with on top of that a recurring £3,250 per annum of maintenance on top as a new customer. And I've got to say these are rates quoted as of last December, so that BT Openreach are increasing their charges, so it's likely to be even more than that soon.
I think there were substantial price increases in April, aren't there? Further comments? Councillor Strong.
Yes, I think we should be pursuing it on the basis that you suggested. We've commented all earlier this evening on our finances and the additional money that we'd be paying if we had to go as a new customer is comparatively substantial. We had got this all agreed and set up, and I think that there is an element of a lack of understanding, although I was very concerned to read the second paragraph, beginning of the second paragraph of the letter about the central bed's understanding of what's been occurring and the fact they didn't seem to be aware of it until October last year, if I've read it correctly. But certainly I think I would like our central beds councillors to be pushing it that we will guarantee that CBC can have the use of the line if it's novated to us. That seems to me entirely sensible and satisfactory to everybody. And I would hope that the officer can be helped to understand what is proposed, and so that the novation agreement can be completed sooner rather than later, rather than committing ourselves to a substantial extra sum of money, which quite frankly, we haven't got.
Noted. Any further comments, or are we essentially noting this response? Councillor Fage.
So I think we note it, but I do understand that the clerk does have regular catch-ups with the officer who signed off this letter. So I would hope that this is topic number one, because given the pressure that we're facing now around crime and vandalism and the role that CCTV has to play in that, you know, this is not, I know this is far down the agenda tonight, but in terms of getting this sorted, it's rumbled on a while now.
It needs to be a priority, doesn't it? Councillor Strong.
Sorry, I just had a further thought. In view of the obvious concern that the police have on this, perhaps we could speak to the police and say, we are trying to actually achieve this. Perhaps you could also express say that to CBC that you would welcome it, so that the sooner we can get our new cameras up and running, the better.
Noted. I wonder whether the clerk would have an opportunity to speak to the officer concerned before the next council meeting and give us an update. I don't know whether diaries would allow that. Okay, so we're noting. Oh, Councillor Russell.
Can we take the other issue of Franklin's now?
Okay, I was going to take it after the crime stats, but that's fine. Okay, then. So this is the Franklin's antisocial behaviour and vandalism. Mr. Hussaini.
Thanks. So, yeah, no, since the Players project began in the Franklin's recreation ground, vandalism has taken place there now on 3 separate occasions. On the first occasion, there was some light damage done to the fencing, secure fencing, and to the portable toilet. On another occasion, the public realm manager actually spotted some of this going on because it was sort of near towards the end of the working day, and managed to get the group moved on, shall we say. And then the worst occasion happened this last weekend and caused quite a lot of damage to both the wood play equipment and to the groundworks beneath them. This obviously, officers reported the incidents to police and are waiting, for a crime reference number to be generated within 7 working days. So 5 more days to go. Having spoken with a contractor earlier today, they've temporarily halted the installation works, pointing out that the vandalism has caused between 2 and 3 weeks worth of delays to their installation, as they are now facing having to go and start all over again, essentially, to redig the multiple holes and trenches which they had been filled in, and to re-prepare the surfaces underneath the existing play equipment, and to correct a lot of the footings that had been damaged. The contractor has now been calling for site security to be introduced in order to preserve the installation that has happened, the work, and obviously the to ensure that the timeline for delivery can continue. Unfortunately, he's confirmed today that as things stand, he can no longer guarantee the 31st of March delivery deadline, which is serious news in itself. Officers are going to be putting, from tomorrow actually, a report to the next council meeting with a series of options to address the vandalism. They will all be essentially funded by PWLB, given that it's within the context of the project. Those solutions range from procuring a patrol vehicle for nights and weekends at a cost of circa £1,000 a week, all the way up through to a security officer presence at the same times for about £2,000 per week. Installing, for now, wildlife camera, which with night vision at the cost of about £1,000 capital, and potentially enhanced signage and other options which we're still looking into. But obviously, we'd welcome TCM members' views on where we're at so far.
As I understand it, a paper is coming to council next Tuesday for consideration by council. So any relatively brief comments on this now? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, firstly, we've got a mobile CCTV camera. Can we get it down there as a matter of urgency is the first thing. That seems to me something that was within our power. Secondly, have we actually spoken to the Chief Superintendent in charge of Biggleswade Police, Grant Maxted, because we should have been speaking to him. We should be getting the police on board. And quite frankly, this is absolutely appalling. I can't really describe in repeatable words what I think about the people that are doing this. This is for the benefit of the children of this town. We're spending a lot of money to do it. The children and their parents and their childminders are really excited by this. And the people who are doing this are beneath contempt. They should be locked up for a very long time, as far as I'm concerned. I don't care what age they are. This is not good enough. The police have got to go in there and they've got to take action. Are very, very difficult. And I think we should also be publicising it and saying, expressing our concern as a council, and that anybody who sees anything must report this as a matter of urgency to the police, to the town council. This is appalling that's going on. We're spending a considerable sum of money to provide something for the town, and these abominable people are beneath contempt. And I'm going to shut up before I say something a lot more extreme.
Noted. Thank you. Councillor Russell.
I come back to what I was trying to say earlier. Yes, I agree with what's being proposed. We need, for those sums of money, we need something coming to council next week, and we need to know what the options are. But how are we going to protect £100,000 worth of new equipment when once it's installed? Because it could well be it's the same group of young people who were causing havoc in the town on Thursday night. If they're part of our community, they could well do exactly the same sorts of things in the future. So we've had the suggestion to put the CCTV down there, but we don't want it there all the time. So what are we going to do? Do we need an extra CCTV? Is the night camera that was being talked about, is that the best solution? Do we need lighting, or is the night camera okay without lighting? I don't know the answers, but I think we need to be looking short term to get the equipment properly installed and to support the contractor. But I think we also need to be thinking longer term about how we look after that area. I'm old enough to sort of remember what Franklin's was like a long time ago. And when it was reworked in the late 1980s, it was because of vandalism at that stage, with lots of broken bottles in the paddling pool. So that had to be filled in and all the rest of it. So this is not a completely new problem. And I think, please can we have an idea of what we might do in the longer term as well as in the short term.
So can I support the suggestion of moving one of our mobile CCTV cameras. I have two other suggestions. A camera is only effective as a deterrent in a lot of And what we want to do is stop the behaviour, not just work out who the perpetrator is. So with that, I think we would need, at least in the short term, where there's lots of fencing, considerable signage, so people know that there's CCTV there, because it's no good if people don't know it's there. And then the other thing is maybe we consider running a bit of a campaign, just asking parents in the town to know where their children are, because they may have no idea their children are doing this, and they don't want to see the images of their children in social media, and some of them have. And the best way to do that is to just ask parents, please, where are your kids? Do you know where they are? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know that they're not involved in this? Any further comments? Councillor Fage.
Yes, so when I was at school, I didn't really get up to things like this, unsurprisingly, but I do know that when there was vandalism in the town and there were examples of people who were then my age, actually still are my age, who were on the build, they would go and break onto a building site, for example, when they were sort of 11, 12 years old, and this would be reported and it would come back via the head teacher of the school, and we'd all be there in assembly, and the head teacher would start with, now it's probably somebody in this room, this is what has happened. And I wasn't going to say this, but I will say this, because it was posted on a Facebook group, a photo of one of the young gentlemen. He was a school-aged child, probably either at Biggleswade Academy, Edward Peak or Stratton, almost certainly that age. The photos were posted. There were a few complaints that the photos were posted, but I understand that they have been handed on to the police. So the police are investigating this, as Karim said separately, we've reported it as well. So I think it's an important thing to do to make very clear to the schools that this has been reported to the police, and that the head teachers need to be aware, because they have the opportunity to communicate to those children in a very grown-up, sensible way. This isn't acceptable, and that there will be repercussions for somebody sat in that room.
Councillor Russell.
Just to say that it seems to be a thing amongst young people now that they go out in groups dressed completely in black. And having talked about what happened Thursday night with some fellow councillors, I understand there's been a group in Shefford as well dressed in black, presumably so that they're not so visible, I don't know. But it just seems to be the thing at the moment.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Woodhead, then Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, just like others, I just want to echo my deep disappointment with other people in the community in behaving in the way they have been. I think it's appalling, and I'm glad it's been referred to the police and they're appropriately investigating. I think Councillor Fage is right. I think a route through is to the middle and upper schools there, and to try and get the message through that way. But I also think we as a council, both as individuals and corporately, need to make the community aware. We are wasting money, taxpayers' money and loans money, on stuff we don't want to spend money on, whether that ends up being security or additional CCTV or whatever it ends up being. This is money we quite frankly haven't got and could be spending on something else, and people need to know. And when they say, why is the council tax going up? Why is this? Why is that? Well, because of idiots in the community doing stupid things like this, and we need to tell people.
Councillor Thomas.
The contractors come back and
Can you put your microphone on, please?
yeah, can I ask if the contractors come back and ask for any more money on the contract, because this is out of scope of the original costs, I would have thought.
Mr. Hussaini?
Thankfully, no, at least not yet.
That's good. I mean, that's incredibly generous of them, I think, because they've had to repeat. The first time I know there was fences down, they spent hours, put them back up, fixing stuff. The second time I know, well, and the toilets were damaged, so they couldn't really do the work until they fixed the toilets. That's the way things are done now. The second time it was fence costs, wasn't it? And bits and pieces, and they had to fix that. So it's time and money for them, and it's also the cost of any damaged equipment. So we're very lucky we've picked a good contractor that was willing to wear this.
Okay.
But I doubt whether they'll wear it anymore, and it might cost a lot of money if we end up paying something.
That's right. I mean, their patience is wearing thin at this point now, in terms of they have asked us for some kind of solution now. just so that they can maintain their schedule. Otherwise, it's seriously.
So I think the anger in the room is clear. Hopefully we've provided some useful guidance. One last comment from Councillor Strawn, and then we'll look forward to.
Is there any insurance cover for this damage?
Is there any insurance cover for this damage?
Yeah, I believe there is actually, but we need to get the crime reference number in first and then pursue it that way. And also we need to ascertain exactly what that damage is in terms of physical, because the main damage at the moment is to our timeline.
In one form or another, and I'm sure we should have a URN for the crime if it's been reported already.
Officers are nodding. Okay, so this will return to council on Tuesday. Let's move back to the agenda then, and it is item 10B, Q3 crime statistics, and we have a written report. Anything to add, Mr. Lord? Okay. Any comments on this? Councillor Strong.
Yes, I think very enlightening a report. Thank you for the time that's obviously gone into producing it and summarising it. But something that does come up, which is directly related to the last item that we've been discussing, is the police want to know the town council's priorities at various times. I think that possibly we can't decide for the council, but it does seem to me that a major concern at the moment, we've had drugs and things like this, and this vandalism may be connected, those on drugs or otherwise. But certainly this vandalism is a matter of major concern, particularly on new projects. And perhaps the council should be considering putting forward the priority is to have adequate policing to stop this unsocial behaviour and vandalism and criminal damage that is going on. Because what has happened down at Franklin's is criminal damage. And I think possibly if we put it down as criminal damage, that would actually hopefully be a stronger point. But I think that if the members agree that we should be putting this to the police as their priority for Biggleswade.
Further comments, please. I think that's a good suggestion. And, you know, it'd be good if some of our fine PCSOs could spend some time walking around some of these areas later at night where we know, when we know some of the trouble occurs.
If I move that as a formal proposal.
Please.
Please, I've removed it.
Is there a seconder? Okay, who's in favour of that proposal? That's unanimous, thank you very much. Any further comments? Actually, I'll make a comment on the crime stats before I go back to the floor. So one thing that jumped out at me is that if I look at the year-by-year comparison, which goes back to 2018, the number of assaults seems stubbornly high. It seems, you know, if you average it out, and there's perhaps a quiet spell during COVID. I guess I'd like to understand which of those assaults are occurring in the home, which of those assaults are occurring in pubs on a Friday, Saturday night. I'd like to understand a little bit more about that, because it feels difficult to think what we might be able to do to improve on those dreadful figures. But if you think about 70 assaults in 2022 in the same quarter, it's a very large number. Councillor Strawn.
Well, to move it forward, perhaps in taking that onto account, the council could request that the officers make inquiries of the police so that we've got a better understanding of whether they are in private domestic circumstances or whether there is more happening on the street, for want of a better description, or in the parks. Because I think, yes, I recollect that the assault was the one that seemed to be of concern as compared to the others. Everything is of concern, but I think the physical assaults, understanding where they are and what's causing them, will be of help, because COVID may have had an increase in domestic abuse, certainly. But now that we've come out of that, is it still occurring? Is it on the street? What's going on? So perhaps officers could ask the police for a bit more information, so we've got a better understanding and what can be done to reduce that.
Agreed. Thank you. Any further comments on the crime stats? No. Okay, thank you for the excellent report. Right, that takes us to the final public open session. Do we have any members of the public? No one is indicating. Okay, thank you. We do not have any exempt items. I don't believe I've missed anything on the agenda this evening. So Therefore, I shall declare the meeting closed. Thank you.